9 days earlier, Adriano had the greatest night of his career. In the Copa America final against Argentina, he scored in the 93rd minute to save Brazil. 7 goals in the tournament. The Golden Boot, a nation chanting his name. He was 22 years old, and he looked like the answer. The next great number 9 in a line that had run from Romario to Ronaldo without interruption. But on August 3rd, 2004, Adriano received a phone call. His father had died, and something inside him never came back. That phone call didn't just break a player, it broke a lineage. And Brazil has been searching for its number 9 ever since. For decades, Brazil didn't just produce strikers, it produced the striker. The number 9 wasn't a position in Brazilian football, it was a lineage. In 1994, Romario carried Brazil to the World Cup, a predator in the box, cold, precise, inevitable. In just 34 World Cup minutes, he scored 5 goals. At a tournament where Brazil had gone 24 years without a title, Romario made it look like it had never been in doubt. He wasn't just a striker, he was a statement. Brazil didn't build plays for him, it built him into the plays. 4 years later, the world met Ronaldo. Faster, stronger, unstoppable. In 1998, he collapsed in a hotel room hours before the World Cup final. Nobody knew why. He played anyway. Brazil lost, and for a moment it looked like the lineage had broken. Then 2002 happened. 8 goals, 2 in the final against Germany. The number 9 shirt wasn't just alive, it was untouchable. And when Ronaldo finally walked away, Brazil didn't panic. It never had to before. Another number 9 had always been waiting. This time felt no different. His name was Adriano. Adriano didn't arrive quietly. He arrived like a storm. At Inter Milan, defenders bounced off him. 6'2", a left foot like a cannon, speed, power, and a shot that seemed to bend the air. In Italy, they called him L'Imperatore, the Emperor. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who played alongside him at Inter, said later, "He could shoot from every angle. Nobody could tackle him. Nobody could take the ball. He was a pure animal." A generation of football fans knew his shot power rating on Pro Evolution Soccer before they knew his story. It was 99, the maximum, because the game's designers couldn't imagine anything higher. And for Brazil, he looked inevitable. He was already dominating Serie A at 22. Then came the summer of 2004, the Copa America, 7 goals in 6 games. And in the final against Argentina, with Brazil seconds from defeat, Adriano rose inside the box and scored the goal that saved the tournament. Every Brazilian newspaper carried the same headline the next morning. Brazil had found its number 9. Romario, Ronaldo, Adriano. The lineage was safe, or at least it looked that way. Adriano was 22 years old. He had 9 goals in his last 10 appearances for club and country. He was about to return to Inter Milan for what everyone expected to be the season he announced himself to the world. The future felt settled. It felt obvious. It felt like Brazil. 9 days after the Copa America final, Adriano was in Italy preparing for the new season with Inter Milan. The phone rang. His family called from Rio. His father had suffered a heart attack. By the time Adriano reached the airport, he was already gone. The man who had raised him in the favelas of Vila Cruzeiro, the man who called him after every match, who celebrated every goal like it was his own, was suddenly not there anymore. Adriano flew back to Brazil for the funeral. When he returned to Italy, the goals were still there, the power was still there, but the joy wasn't. Friends later said he began calling home every night, dialing the same phone number just to hear his father's voice on the answering machine. He started showing up to training drunk, sleeping on the floor of his apartment, telling coaches he simply couldn't go on. From the outside, the Emperor was still scoring goals, but the person behind the shirt was beginning to disappear. Inter Milan didn't know how to help him. Brazil didn't know how to help him. No one did. In a letter he wrote years later, Adriano described those nights in Milan. Alone in his apartment, homesick in a way that had no cure. "I could only sleep if I drank," he wrote. "I was afraid I wouldn't wake up in time, so sometimes I simply didn't sleep and went to training drunk." His coaches covered for him. They told the press he was injured. Inter's medical staff would sometimes find him sleeping in the treatment room, still wearing the clothes from the night before. The emperor had a hole in his ankle, he would later say, and one in his soul. And without anyone realizing it, the shirt was already becoming empty. For a while, people believed Adriano would recover. Great strikers had disappeared before. Ronaldo had come back from worse. So Brazil waited, and Adriano kept scoring just enough to keep the belief alive. But the rhythm was gone. The unstoppable force that once terrified defenders began to fade into something unpredictable. One week he looked like the emperor again. The next, he was missing training. Then missing matches. Then disappearing entirely. By 2009, the striker who was supposed to inherit Brazil's most sacred shirt had walked away from European football. He went back to Rio, back to the neighborhoods where he grew up, back to the friends who had known him before the fame, before the expectations, before the weight of the number 9. And while Adriano slowly stepped away from the game, something strange began to happen in Brazilian football. For the first time in decades, there wasn't another striker ready. The conveyor belt had stopped. Brazil tried Fred, a powerful target man who became the symbol of the 2014 World Cup humiliation. It tried Pato, a teenage prodigy at AC Milan who burned bright for 2 seasons and then disappeared into injuries and inconsistency. It tried Hulk, who was strong and direct but never convinced anyone he was the answer. Later came Gabriel Jesus, Roberto Firmino, Richarlison, players with genuine quality, players who scored important goals, players who gave everything for the shirt. But watching them was always different from watching Romario, or Ronaldo, or the brief version of Adriano that existed in the summer of 2004. There was no sense of inevitability, no feeling that the opposition simply couldn't stop what was coming. The shirt fit, but it never quite felt full. For the first time since the early 1990s, Brazil wasn't continuing a lineage. It was searching for one. Why the conveyor belt stopped? Whether it was the academies, the tactics, or the way Brazilian football exported its best players younger and younger, that's a story for another video. But the search itself started here, with an empty locker and a phone call that nobody in football was prepared for. 20 years later, Brazil is still searching. Fred, Hulk, Pato, Gabriel Jesus, Richarlison. Each one stepped into the shirt. Each one left it feeling slightly too big. Not because they weren't good enough footballers, but because the shirt wasn't just asking for goals. It was asking for something harder to define. The thing Romario had, the thing Ronaldo had, the thing Adriano, briefly, seemed to have too. Today, Brazil prepares for the 2026 World Cup. Carlo Ancelotti is still deciding who leads the line. João Pedro, Endrick, names with genuine ability. But the question that once never needed asking is still there. Who is Brazil's number 9? For most nations, that would be a tactical problem. For Brazil, it feels like something deeper. Romario, Ronaldo. Then, for one summer, Adriano. Brazil didn't just lose a player that August, it lost a lineage. And ever since, the most famous shirt in Brazilian football has felt just a little emptier. The number 9 is still there, but the certainty that once filled it never really came back. And the strange part is, the real reason Brazil stopped producing strikers might have nothing to do with Adriano at all. That story is coming next.